You heard it once, a sound so faint it was almost silence, not a voice, not a word, but something older than language, a whisper that slipped between your thoughts when the world went quiet. You dismissed it. You were busy, distracted, pulled into noise and screens and the endless scroll of other people's lives, but it waited, patient, like it had all of time to spare, because it knew eventually you'd slow down long enough to feel the emptiness beneath your routines, the hollowness behind the smile, and when that moment came, it would speak again, but you weren't ready, so you ignored it, numbed it, filled the void with people who didn't understand you, opinions that never belonged to you, comforts that quietly poisoned you. You lived through days that felt like reruns, weeks that evaporated. You gave your time to the world and your silence to yourself. You convinced yourself this was life, that maybe if you were nice enough, quiet enough, invisible enough, you'd be safe. But deep down you knew safety was the lie they sold you so you'd never become a threat. If you're hearing this, you've already stepped outside the system. Subscribe before they pull you back under, because if you had listened, really listened, you would have remembered who you are. You would have remembered the things you felt as a child but were taught to forget. The urge to fight back, to question, to destroy false authority. You would have remembered that before they taught you shame, before they tied rules around your fire, you were something terrifying, not cruel, but untamed. They saw it in you. That's why they broke you early. They couldn't kill it, so they buried it under guilt and praise and expectations that were never meant to serve you, only to control you. But the whisper never left. It followed you. It hid in your insomnia, in the tightness behind your smile, in that burning behind your ribs when you were told to stay quiet, stay still, stay normal. And every time you ignored it, a part of you cracked, not loud, not all at once, just small invisible fractures, until one day you woke up and couldn't recognize yourself. You had the same name but none of the fire. You moved through rooms like a shadow. You spoke in apologies and half-truths. You existed, but you weren't alive. Now the whisper grows louder, not because it's changed, but because you have. The cracks have widened, the noise is less convincing, and somewhere beneath the ruin, something ancient is stirring. It's not here to comfort you. It's not here to inspire you. It's here to confront you, to force you to see what you traded for peace, to remind you that you once heard the truth and chose silence. You'll regret not hearing this before, but regret is a good sign. It means you're waking up, and what comes next is not forgiveness, it's reckoning. You thought time moved forward. A gentle current, indifferent and linear, ticking like a clock on a wall you stopped noticing. But you were wrong. Time doesn't move. It waits, it watches, and beneath the surface of your life, behind the predictable faces and the hollow greetings, there's a deeper mechanism, a hidden clock not bound to hours or days, but to potential, the raw and brutal measurement of what you could have been. This clock doesn't tick in seconds. It marks decision. It logs betrayals, especially the ones you made against yourself. Every time you said yes when your chest screamed no. Every moment you swallowed truth for peace. Every silent night you stared at a ceiling, knowing you were becoming smaller, knowing you were choosing safety over soul. The clock was recording, not punishing, not forgiving, just tracking. There are no alarms, no warnings, only silence, until one day it speaks, not with words, with weight, a pressure in your chest when you wake up, a sharp whisper beneath your breath when you look in the mirror and can't recognize what's looking back, not because your face changed, but because your edge is gone. That's how it starts. The realization that you've been monitored, not by people, not by God, but by a system deeper than both, the archive. It doesn't care about your comfort. It remembers every time you hesitated when it was time to strike. It saw the predator in you chained, mocked, sedated by screens and shallow validation. It saw you adapt to cages, call them homes, and decorate them with smiling lies. It remembers when you were 10 years old, and something in you wanted to burn brighter, but the world said, sit still, so you did. The clock marked it, one more tick, one more echo of the man or woman you never became. You've mistaken routine for progress. You thought surviving another year was winning, but you're not growing, you're drifting, and that's what it feeds on. The drift, the slow erosion of the soul through ordinary living. The hidden clock is ancient, older than cities, and far more honest than the people around you. It doesn't care about your intentions. It counts only action, movement, will, and now it's full. The data is complete. The time you've spent denying your own nature has been weighed, not to destroy you, but to remind you, to confront you, because somewhere in this life of artificial light and polite despair, something sacred went to sleep inside you, something ruthless, something immortal, and now it's waking up. You weren't born lost, you were born dangerous, wired with instinct, sharpened by the silence between your heartbeat and the next catastrophe. As a child, you didn't ask for permission. You acted, you took, you built, you stared into the dark without flinching. But then, the soft voices arrived, smiling faces, gentle corrections. Calm down, be nice, wait your turn. And with every whispered rule, a piece of you was buried alive under layers of obedience dressed as love. They didn't kill your fire, they froze it. You began to apologize for existing. You learned how to walk without taking up space. You shrank to fit inside their expectations. Even when your bones screamed, they praised you for being quiet, not for being right. They taught you to avoid the fight, to avoid the edge, to fear your own mind. And the worst part, you believed them. You believed that peace was safety, that routine was success, that comfort was happiness. But the truth was always twitching beneath your skin, wasn't it? The sense that something was wrong, that you were living in a script written by cowards for children. Every time you hesitated, that was their training. Every time you swallowed your instinct, that was their programming. They told you your rage was toxic, your ambition selfish, your hunger unnatural. But what if that hunger was the only honest part of you left? What if the chaos you feel is not a flaw, but the last remaining proof that you haven't been completely domesticated? There's a reason you still dream in symbols of fire, of flight, of blood and conquest. Your subconscious hasn't forgotten what you are. You weren't made to sit still and follow instructions. You were engineered for war, not with weapon, not always with violence, but with precision, with eyes that notice what others don't, with silence that cuts deeper than any scream. And they knew this. That's why they broke you young, because a wild mind that isn't owned is a threat. A soul that doesn't kneel is dangerous. But something slipped through their cracks. A fragment of you survived, watching, waiting, listening. You're feeling it now, aren't you? The unease, the shift, like waking up in a room you didn't realize you were trapped in. They trained you to forget, but not well enough. You've started to remember, not facts, not lessons, but truth. And truth doesn't whisper, it roars. So don't call this a revelation, call it a return to the version of you they tried to erase, the version that never asked, never begged, never bled quietly, the version that didn't just survive the system, but now studies it like prey. You were never weak, you were drugged, softened, and now the sedation is wearing off. Now the real work begins. There is a room you've never entered, but you've stood outside its door more times than you can count. It waits for you in silence, tucked beneath the noise of routine and distraction. No signs, no locks, only a knowing. You felt it before, in the stillness after a disappointment, in the ache that visits you when everyone else is asleep. Behind that door lies the archive, the place where the unlived versions of you reside. Not ghosts, not dreams, blueprints, each one more brutal, more brilliant than the person you see in the mirror now. You step inside, and it hits you like static in the bones. The air hums with what could have been. A version of you with fire in his eyes and blood on his knuckles stands silently in the corner. He took no disrespect and feared no consequence. Another sits surrounded by books, sharpened by solitude, a mind forged in agony but laced with genius. There's one who walks like a king, not because he was crowned but because he never bowed. These aren't fantasies. They're aborted mission, choices never made, battles never fought. You locked them away because someone told you not to want too much, to be nice, to be realistic, and you obeyed. The room is endless, every inch a relic of restraint. Your jaw tightened because the pain here isn't in what you see, it's in what you recognize. These lives didn't slip away, you let them go. With every excuse, every time you swallowed your voice, every time you hesitated, every time you betrayed the whisper that told you to move. Regret isn't just sadness, it's a map. It points directly to the place where you were meant to grow teeth. You walk past them slowly, each version of you holding your stare, not with blame, but with warning. They are not here to be mourned. They are here to remind you that you're running out of time. One day this archive will close, the door will vanish, and you'll become just another file, another almost. The room begins to flicker, the air bends, and for a split second you see it. The version of you that didn't run, didn't beg, didn't bend. He sees you too, and you feel something ancient stir inside you. Not hope, not inspiration, something older, obligation, because the worst thing you can do isn't fail. It's survive in fragments while a masterpiece waits in silence. You don't need motivation, you need a reckoning. You need to look every unlived version of yourself in the eye and choose which one you're willing to bury forever. The rest will wait, but not forever. It didn't happen all at once. It began in a quiet room, where no one noticed when the light in your eyes dimmed. You were young, still wild with possibility, but someone said something that fractured the air. Maybe it was the way they looked at you, like you were an inconvenience. Maybe it was how they spoke your name, like a burden. That was the first scar. Small, invisible, but permanent. They called it growing up. You called it betrayal, and you carried it without knowing. You learned quickly, speak less, smile when you're uncomfortable, apologize even when you're not wrong. They trained you in subtle ways, no whips, no chains, just cold glances, withdrawn love, calculated silences. Your spirit didn't break, it folded, bent inward, and something inside you started taking notes. A quiet archivist in the back of your mind began recording every humiliation, every dismissal, every time you weren't chosen, heard, defended. They thought you forgot, but your nervous system never did. It kept the files. You became excellent at playing small, camouflage, strategic invisibility. You knew how to survive rooms where your presence felt too loud. You gave up battles just to stay close to people who would never protect you. And they took advantage of that, because that's what they do. Those who fear your potential most are always the first to convince you you're nothing special. You obeyed because you thought obedience meant safety. It didn't. It meant erasure. There was a day, you remember it sharply, like a shard in your throat when you needed someone to fight for you, and no one came. Not a friend, not a parent.
Not even God.
That moment rewrote something fundamental in your mind. The illusion snapped. The idea that someone was watching over you, gone. That was the second scar. Deeper, colder. You stopped waiting after that. You stopped asking, but a piece of you stayed there, frozen at the sea, still looking back, wondering why no one showed up. That's when the other you began to stir. The one built from silence and memory. The one that doesn't need permission. They've been watching from the shadows of your psyche, sharpening their edge, waiting for the moment you'd finally break enough to notice them. You've felt them before in your rage, your exhaustion, your hunger to be more, but you denied them, because being whole meant facing what was done to you. It meant admitting that your first scar wasn't an accident. It was a message. You weren't broken. You were targeted. And now the one inside you, the version that remembers everything, they're ready not to heal, not to forgive, but to rise. Your first scar wasn't the end. It was the entrance. You were never meant to be soft. You were meant to be steel, forged in betrayal, sharpened by absence. And now, it's your turn to carve a scar into the world. There's someone else inside you, always has been. You've heard them, late at night in the silence between your thoughts. When the world stops pretending, and the masks slip, a presence, not soft, not kind, but exact, dangerous maybe, or just honest. You've buried them under rules, apologies, and the lies you were taught to swallow. But they've been waiting, not asleep, watching. Every moment you hesitated, every time you said yes when your bones screamed no. They marked it, quietly, like a soldier studying the enemy. They are not the version of you the world would approve of. They don't care about likes, pleasantries, or being understood. They don't want peace. They want the truth, the kind that scorches, the kind that makes people shift uncomfortably in their skin. You called them too much, too intense, too cold, but maybe they were never the problem. Maybe they were the antidote, the cure to your obedience, your compliance, your slow decay. There was a time you could feel them more clearly, as a child, before the shame, before you learned how to shrink. Back then you were fire, unafraid to speak, to demand, to take. But they broke you early, didn't they? Shamed the anger, mocked the silence, praised you for being manageable. You learned quickly that being acceptable meant being small, so you put that version of you in a cage, locked it with every yes you didn't mean, every laugh that wasn't real, every apology for simply existing. But here's the thing no one tells you. Cages rust, locks weaken, and eventually what you buried begins to rise, not as a scream, but as stillness, the kind that makes predators nervous. That version of you doesn't beg anymore, doesn't chase, doesn't perform. They observe, they calculate, they wait, and you've felt them lately, haven't you? When you're cornered, when someone disrespects you and your jaw tightens but your mouth stays shut, that heat in your chest, that's them knocking. They're not here to hurt you, they're here to restore you, to strip the weakness, the confusion, the years of pleasing, to make you unrecognizable to the ones who thought they knew you. But they demand a price. No more illusions, no more denial. You will lose people, you will scare people. You may even scare yourself, but you'll finally be a line, whole, a weapon sharpened by betrayal, forged in silence and tempered by truth. Most people never meet their other self. They die as echoes of who they could have been, but not you. You're standing at the edge now, and the voice inside, it's not a whisper anymore. It's a command. Let them out. You've been walking among masks for so long, you started to forget your own face. The laughter, hollow. The praise, conditional. Every handshake a silent negotiation of who would betray whom first. You play the part well, polite, stable, agreeable, but you know, somewhere behind your eyes, beneath the calm exterior, A storm has been pacing the cage, not out of rage, out of recognition. You've sensed it. This world does not reward truth. It rewards the performance of it. And you were never taught to act, only to endure. Look closer. The ones rising fastest are not the wisest, not the strongest. They're the most convincing. They shape-shift on command, say what is expected, kneel when told. Their success is built not on merit, but mimicry. You see them wear ambition like a costume, play virtue like a flute. And you watched with clenched teeth as the undeserving were crowned. You convinced yourself it was timing, fate, bad luck, but it wasn't. It was your refusal to kneel. You would not beg, you would not shrink, and for that, they ignored you, overlooked you, silenced you, not because you lacked value, but because you would not trade your soul for applause. They fear the real, that's why they smother it early. Schools dull the sharp ones, workplaces isolate the dangerous thinkers, families teach obedience over instinct, because real power doesn't conform, it confronts. And you were born with confrontation in your blood. That's why you've always felt out of place. Why small talk tastes like poison. Why your silence screams louder than their speeches. They wanted you to believe you were broken. In truth, you were uncorrupted. Now you stand at the threshold. You can continue pretending, smiling while hollowing out, clapping for kings made of dust, or you can step back into your origin. The you before compromise, the you before delusion. You are not like them. You never were, and no amount of pretending will make you forget that. The world they've built is fragile. It depends on your silence, your participation in the masquerade. But if even one like you refuses to dance, the illusion begins to crack. You don't need to script, you don't need to explain. Just stop pretending. Let the masks slip around you. Watch how fast the world turns cold when you stop feeding it with false smiles. That's when you'll know. It was never about being accepted. It was about being contained. But you cannot be contained anymore. Your power doesn't lie in being seen. It lies in being felt. And once you walk in truth, not performance, the game changes. You weren't meant to blend in. You were meant to unsettle, to disrupt, to remind the world what it forgot. That power doesn't need to perform. It needs only to exist. You've always felt it, that prickling on the back of your neck when no one's around, the silence that watches you louder than any noise, the feeling that your life was never just your own. You told yourself it was paranoia, overthinking, a glitch in the nervous system. But the truth is far older, and it has teeth. They've been watching you, not with cameras, not with drones. Something older, quieter, beyond governments, beyond algorithms, the architects, the elders, the eyes. You don't know their names, because they've erased every trace of them from the world you think you live in. But their presence is burned into the ancient scripts of your DNA. They don't interfere. They observe, they record, and sometimes they test. You weren't born into a family. You were placed like a pawn, like an experiment. Your pain monitored, your silence measured, your rebellion predicted before it ever crossed your mind. And still you wonder why the weight of the world feels designed to suffocate you specifically. It's not arrogance. It's design. They knew what you could become, and they feared it. Every time you fell, they leaned in closer, not to help, not to save, but to see if you would break. Most do, collapse under the pressure, become background characters in their own lives. But you kept crawling, bleeding, blind, but moving, and that changed something. You went from test subject to anomaly, an unpredictable variable, dangerous. They're not gods, but they understand power like ancient priests understood fire. You're the equation they couldn't solve, not quite controlled, not quite tamed. So they watch, through people, through patterns, through the cracks in your sanity. They've sent distractions, temptations, soft cages with golden locks, all designed to keep you busy, not awakened. And yet you woke up anyway. That twitch in your thoughts when everyone agrees but something feels wrong. That's not doubt, that's signal, that's the code breaking, the dream shattering. And now they see it in your eyes, the change. You no longer look for permission. You don't ask to be saved. You move like a question no one wants to answer. And that terrifies them, because there's one thing they fear more than chaos. Someone who sees the pattern, sees the machine, sees the watchers. You are no longer just observed. You've become the observer. And once you see them, they can't unsee you. The rules are different now. Every step you take is no longer tracked with curiosity, but with caution. Every silence you hold is no longer emptiness, but a weapon unsheathed. You are the consequence of their underestimation, a signal they never meant to amplify. But it's too late. The eye blinks, and you don't flinch. You are awake. They are watching, and for the first time they're not sure you'll lose. There was a night you don't talk about. You pretend it faded, buried under time and distractions, but it waits, still, breathing. It wasn't just a bad night. It was the rupture, the moment the fabric of your reality split open and showed you what it really was, a performance stitched together with rules you never agreed to. That night, the room was too quiet, too dark. The silence didn't comfort you, it accused you. Every object around you became a witness. The walls watched, the air mocked, and in that moment, something ancient inside you cracked. They had told you pain makes you stronger, but they never mentioned how much of you dies first, how many versions of yourself you have to murder just to stay breathing. You sat there staring into a void that didn't stare back, not because it wasn't real, but because it didn't need to. You were the void. And for the first time you understood how deep your hollow ran. They had broken you quietly, not with violence, but with neglect, with absence, with the slow drip of being unseen until you disappeared from yourself. You thought you were alone. You weren't. That moment was a ritual, not by choice, but by design. Every being meant to rise must first collapse. You were being stripped, unmade, dismantled. And in your tears, in your stillness, something watched, not out of pity, out of interest. The architects, the ones who wait, they don't crown those who've never bled. They only whisper to those who've been silenced by the world and still found the courage to scream without sound. That night didn't end. It became part of you, a scar carved across your psyche like a brand from something older than language. You began to wear your pain differently after that, not as a wound but as armor, subtle at first. You didn't speak as much. You noticed what others missed. You stopped begging to be heard and started learning how to listen in ways others couldn't. You stopped reaching out and started reaching in. They'll call it a breakdown, but you know better now. That was your descent, the plunge into your own underworld, not the end, the beginning. The gods of old never ascended without first dying to who they were. You are not meant to bounce back. You are meant to resurrect. That collapse wasn't your failure. It was your forge. The version of you that stood before that night, weak, eager, desperate, is gone. What remains is something colder, sharper. You stopped asking why it happened to you. Now you ask why it didn't destroy you completely. It should have, but it didn't. And that terrifies them, because now you're not someone they can predict. You're someone they'll regret crossing. And it all began with the collapse they thought would erase you. They told you to calm down, to breathe, to count to 10 and swallow your rage like it was a sin. They told you anger was ugly, obsession was unhealthy, ambition was dangerous. And so you buried it. You trained yourself to smile while your stomach twisted. You nodded. apologized, stepped aside. They praised your humility, called it maturity, but what they really meant was obedience. They feared what you were, so they trained you not to feel. But somewhere in the pit of you, the flame never died. It flickered, weak and silent, beneath layers of guilt and suppression, until now. Until you realized that what you were taught to hate was your weapon all along. Your rage was not dysfunction. It was data, a compass. It pointed directly at what mattered. It screamed at every boundary crossed, every moment you betrayed yourself to please cowards, and they called it a flaw, because they knew if you ever listened to it, they'd lose control. You've been walking around sedated, diluted, harmless. You were told that darkness must be healed, but they never told you that some wounds are sacred, that some pain isn't meant to disappear. It's meant to guide. Your obsession, it was never madness. It was clarity, your need to prove them wrong. Not ego, just unfinished war. They couldn't control that kind of fuel, so they demonized. But you're starting to remember the most dangerous man is the one who makes peace with his monsters. Your darkness is not your enemy. It is your edge. It is the echo of every betrayal, the memory of every door slammed in your face, the fire stitched into your bones by every laugh, every dismissal, every time they called you too much and not enough in the same breath. You are not too emotional. You are underused, underestimated, underfed. Now look in the mirror. That silence in your eyes, that is stored power. That is all the noise you swallowed, ready to erupt with precision. This isn't about rage for the sake of chaos. This is about aimed fury, cold fire, tactical madness. You don't explode. You calculate. You wait. And when it's time, you move without mercy. They tried to tame you with comfort, numb you with distraction, shame you into shrinking, but you didn't die. You adapted. You learned their rules, mastered their language, wore their masks, and now you're standing here, fluent in the art of war, holding every ounce of darkness they tried to erase. Use it. Every scar, every insult, every silent night you swore you'd never feel weak again. Don't heal from it. Harness it. Because what they tried to extinguish wasn't a flaw, it was your origin. And now that you remember, they won't see you coming. They taught you that power was loud, that it wore suits, shouted orders, took stages, but those were actors, empty vessels performing a script written by hands you were never supposed to see. Real power doesn't announce itself. It watches, it calculates in silence while the world screams for attention. You've felt this in rooms where someone didn't speak but their presence choked the air, where a glance held more weight than 1,000 words. You didn't know why, but now you do. Power is not what they told you, it's what they were afraid you'd learn. You were trained to mistake movement for control, to measure worth by noise, applause, recognition. But wolves don't howl when they hunt. They listen. The ones who last, who rise, who alter the shape of the world. They're not loud. They're deliberate. And you've been loud too long, seeking validation from people who can't carry the weight of your silence, speaking when you should have been observing, reacting when you should have been collecting. You were not weak, just unfinished. You think power is charisma, influence, authority? No. Power is restraint. Power is seeing everything and saying nothing. Knowing exactly how to kill, but choosing when. It's not about strength. It's about structure. And your structure has been unstable, too reactive, too open, too loud. You've shown too much. They've studied your patterns. They've read your fears through your eyes. They knew where to press because you never learned to guard the map of your soul. But now the noise begins to rot. The illusion cracks. You feel it, don't you? The shift. You've stopped chasing. You've started watching. You've started waiting. That is the beginning of dominance. Not through anger, not through bravado, but precision. ruthless precision, like the blade beneath silk, like a shadow that doesn't move until it has to. Power is architecture, not expression, and those who wield it, they don't raise their voices, they raise consequences. In ancient circles there were no speeches, there were gazes, there were silences so heavy they broke men before swords ever drew. Your ancestors knew this. They built their power in stillness, in posture, in gaze. Now you remember. Now you begin again, quietly. Your words will become rarer, your movements slower, your presence heavier, and they will feel it. The same ones who dismissed you will sense the weight before they understand the reason. And by then it will be too late, because the anatomy of power lives in what you withhold, not what you give. And you are done giving. You weren't born timid. You were made that way. Slowly, surgically, they shaved the edges off your instincts, muted the volume on your inner fire. Every time you hesitated to speak your mind, every time you flinched from confrontation, it wasn't weakness, it was programming. Beneath your skin, a blueprint of something ruthless and unbreakable still exists, but layer by layer they buried it, with politeness, with obedience, with guilt, and you swallowed it all thinking compliance was character, that silence was virtue, that comfort was the prize. You never questioned why the wolves kept winning. They trained you to apologize before you were even accused, to wait your turn in rooms that had no intention of ever calling your name. They trained your gaze to lower, your spine to slouch, your tone to soften, to never be too much, to never want too loud. Every punishment came wrapped in reason, every betrayal framed as a lesson, and somewhere along the line you believed them. That power was dangerous, that dominance was cruelty, that wanting more made you selfish. But they lied. They always lie, because people who think they're monsters for dreaming too big are easy to cage. You weren't just trained to fail, you were trained to feel grateful for it. That's the brilliance of their design. You became your own warden, policing your thoughts, silencing your hunger, dimming your own fire, so no one else would feel small beside it. And what did it buy you? Approval, belonging. They still overlooked you, still doubted you, still walked past you in favor of louder, cruder shapes, because the world doesn't reward the most polite, it rewards the most certain, and certainty is born when you stop kneeling to false gods. There is a version of you with teeth, one that never waits, that doesn't act, doesn't blink. It's not violent, it's not unkind, but it is unapologetic. It remembers the first time you were mocked for standing tall, the first time love became leverage, the first time you were punished for your power, and it wants back in, not to destroy everything, just to take back what was stolen. That edge, that command, that unspoken gravity that makes people listen before you speak. You still have it, under the layers, under the lies. They made you pray, because it was safer for them, because the moment you remember what you are, the hunt ends, and you're not running anymore. You're tracking, you're listening, you're silent, but this silence is not surrender. It's the tension before movement, the stillness of the archer pulling the string. Everything that was used to break you is now filed into memory, coordinates, pattern, weak points. Your training is over. The untraining begins now. They fed you noise and called it life. 1,000 voices, 1,000 screens, every one of them clawing at your mind, stealing inches of your focus until you couldn't hear your own thoughts without interference. You were born into clarity, but trained into static, taught to confuse stimulation with meaning. They made you scroll while your instincts screamed. Your ambition was whispering from the shadows, but the noise was louder, always louder. You didn't lose time. It was taken from you in tiny, glittering distractions, dressed as harmless moments. You've been watched, not by some cosmic order, but by those who understand the architecture of weakness. They know that power does not vanish. It fragments, and fragments are easy to scatter. With well-timed alerts and curated envy, The feed became a leash. You were measured by your ability to focus, and most days you failed, not because you lacked strength, but because your attention was stolen before it could evolve. They never had to chain you, they just made you addicted to interruption. But now something in you has changed, a shift beneath the noise. The signal is returning. It's faint, like a heartbeat beneath rubble, but it's yours. The thoughts that once terrified you, the clarity, the hunger, the silence are rising again. Silence is not emptiness. It's the chamber where power sharpens. Noise is friction, silence is steel, and you are beginning to remember what steel feels like. Your mind uncorrupted, your will undiluted. This is the signal, raw, brutal, ancient, the frequency of the original you, the one that was buried but never broken. You're starting to see the pattern. Who profits from your distraction? Who gets richer when you stay average? The influencers who never sleep, the feeds that never stop, the algorithms built to trigger your pleasure centers while numbing your drive. You begin to realize that distraction isn't entertainment, it's war. Psychological warfare disguised as convenience. Every alert is a thief, every unnecessary conversation a toxin, every random piece of content you consume without intention, a quiet execution of your potential. Now you begin the purge, not out of anger, but clarity. You silence notifications like killing spies. You uninstall what weakens you. You speak less. You listen less. You choose what enters your mind the way warriors choose what enters their veins. Precision replaces addiction. Stillness replaces stimulation. In this silence, you don't feel empty. You feel awake. You feel dangerous. The world still spins in chaos, but you no longer rotate. You orbit something deeper now, something silent, something ancient. Not everyone will hear this signal. Most are too far gone, but not you, because you're still listening. Because somewhere deep down you always knew the noise wasn't real. The signal is, and now it's all you hear. You stand at the edge of a crumbling world built from your own excuses. Every brick of comfort, every wall of hesitation is rotting under the weight of time. You feel it, don't you? The silent decay creeping into your thoughts, the soft surrender that whispers, stay as you are, it's safer here. But safety is where you die slowly, unnoticed. There is no peace in rotting walls. There is only the slow burial of everything you could have been. You weren't meant to live like this, not built to be fragile, not born to be silent. The weakness you carry isn't natural, it's inherited. It was given to you by those who failed themselves and needed you to stay small, to live trapped in the same poisoned cycle they never escaped. Their fear became your foundation. Their doubts turned into your ceiling. You were taught to accept the cracks instead of tearing down the structure and rebuilding it stronger, colder, sharper. But now the choice is here, unavoidable. Rebuild or rot. There is no middle ground anymore. Every day you choose inaction. The old version of you grows mold in the dark corners of your mind. It waits, laughing quietly, knowing you will break before you rise. But what if you didn't break? What if you shattered everything instead? Every rule, every chain, and started again with no mercy for what once held you. Rebuilding is war. It's not romantic or clean. It's violent. You'll have to rip apart every false belief that ever touched you, burn every lie you've ever whispered to yourself, and face the raw skeleton of who you are. And in that silence, stripped of comfort, stripped of validation, you will feel the first pulse of real power. The kind that doesn't beg for recognition, the kind that doesn't need to explain itself. The world won't wait for you to be ready. It never has. The decay around you is spreading fast, and if you don't rise, you will be buried alive in the ruins of who you could have been. But if you choose to rebuild, truly rebuild, you become something unrecognizable. not the weak shadow that once walked blindly through this life, but a figure that moves like a storm, reshaping everything in its path. You don't get to delay anymore. The clock is bleeding second. Either you start tearing down the walls now, brick by brick, or they will collapse on you. Rebuild or rot, that is the only choice left. They never told you about them, because they don't speak of ghosts that walk in daylight. No headlines, no followers, no applause, only a quiet presence behind the veil of society, shaping it, bending it. The silent elite, not born from privilege but forged in shadows and sharpened by solitude. You've passed them on the street, felt the weight of their gaze without knowing why. Your chest tightened, not out of fear, out of recognition. A primal instinct buried deep inside your bones whispering, that could be you. But it wasn't, not yet. You were too loud, too hungry to be seen, too eager to prove something to people who were never watching. But they, the silent ones, they don't perform, they calculate. They vanish in crowds while orchestrating the very stage you dance on. Their strength doesn't come from shouting louder. It comes from understanding who not to become. And now, finally, your skin is shedding. The noise no longer excites you. The spotlight feels cheap. You've started listening to the silence between words, watching how people breathe instead of what they say. And that's how it begins. They live by laws no school teaches. Law 1, never reveal the full extent of your power, because real power is never broadcasted. It's felt like gravity or a loaded gun on the table. You don't need to speak it, they sense it. Law 2, observe longer than you act, because people will always tell you who they are if you're patient enough to let them believe you're not watching. Law 3, detach from outcome, but obsess over execution. Emotion clouds precision. Attachment breeds weakness. You can want everything and still move like you want nothing. That's when you become dangerous. But there's a deeper law, unspoken, ancient. The world is not ruled by those who scream for justice. It is ruled by those who understand the architecture of silence. You begin to see the symbols, not on flags, in glances, in posture, in hesitation. Power is not given, it's assumed. They took it while the rest of the world was still debating who deserved it. And now they test you, not with opportunities, but with betrayals. They want to see if you'll crumble or calibrate. You thought silence meant submission. You were wrong. Silence was strategy. You thought solitude meant weakness. It was training. The real ones, those who rose through blood and ash, they don't explain themselves. They don't flinch. They don't beg. They wait, and when they strike, the world wonders where they came from. But you know, you were becoming one the entire time. You just had to stop needing permission. Now they see you, maybe not fully, but enough to nod, to mark your name in that invisible ledger of the unfuckwithable. You're not part of the noise anymore. You're part of the algorithm behind it. The law of the silent elite isn't spoken, it's lived, and now it's living in you. They never saw you coming, not because you were invisible, but because they never bothered to look. To them you were background noise, the quiet one, the almost, the never would be. They spoke over you, laughed in rooms you weren't invited to, and mistook your stillness for emptiness. But stillness is not silence. Stillness is coiled violence, disciplined, patient, watching. You heard their doubt, you memorized their dismissal, and you turned it into fuel. While they slept under the illusion of their own importance, you were sharpening, not your blade, but your mind. You didn't scream, you didn't beg, you didn't explain. You just disappeared into the cold, into discipline, into hunger. And when you returned, you weren't looking for applause. You were the storm. No thunder, just pressure. The kind of pressure that breaks bone without a sound. The kind that bends the world slowly, but permanently. They will pretend they never underestimated you. They will act like they always saw it in you. But you remember the jokes, the side eyes, the dismissals. Every moment they tried to shrink you is carved into your psyche like scripture. And now it's not revenge you're after. It's correction. They must feel the weight of the monster they helped build, not to destroy them, but to show them what they fed when they thought they were starving. You don't move to be seen now. You move like smoke, like something that can't be predicted or contained. Power has made you silent. The loudest ones burn out first. But you burn inward. You've mastered the art of staying lethal without needing to prove it. No need for validation, no thirst for credit. Your victories are surgical, clean, and absolute. You strike, and then you vanish, leaving only the echo of your presence and the memory of what you've become. They underestimated the boy who listened too much, the girl who sat alone, the soul that refused to fit. They mocked the quiet, but the quiet was learning, the quiet was becoming, and now the quiet is consequence. You are not what they remember, you are what they fear in silence. You've become the moment they regret, not because you hate them, but because they failed to imagine you could rise without their permission. They'll regret underestimating you, not because you sought vengeance, but because you no longer need anything from them. Not permission, not recognition, not love. You've outgrown the room they kept you in. The door is open now, not because they unlocked it, but because you broke the damn wall down. Everything has been taken from you. The noise, the praise, the lies that used to comfort you, stripped away like old skin. You don't reach for the phone anymore. You don't check the faces that never looked at you to begin with. The chaos you once clung to, the endless motion, the distractions disguised as urgency, all of it has collapsed into a single suffocating stillness. And yet, you're still here. At first, the silence feels like punishment, like exile. You search for someone to blame, but there's no one left in the room, just you and something ancient watching from behind your ribs. It stares without eyes, waiting without mercy, not to comfort, not to rescue, but to witness. This is the sacred void, the space between who you were and what you are becoming. It is not a place, it is a condition, and it is earned. The world taught you that silence meant weakness, that stillness was surrender. They lied. The real ones, the ones who move without being seen, the ones who bend time in their favor, they all come here. They disappear for a reason, not to escape, but to forge. Steel doesn't scream while it's hardening, neither should you. There is a kind of clarity that only emerges after everything breaks. No more noise, no more borrowed beliefs, just a dark mirror reflecting your raw architecture. And you finally ask the question no one ever taught you to ask. What am I when there's nothing left to perform for? The answer doesn't come in words. It comes in pulse. It comes in pressure. A stillness that hums like a storm about to touch ground. Out there, they mistake visibility for power. They think noise equals relevance. But you've seen too much, heard too little that mattered. And now, inside this sacred absence, you begin to feel it, the recalibration, a realignment with something older than your trauma, older than your name. Your senses shift. You start to read people like code. Patterns become visible. Weakness emits a frequency. So does hunger. So does fear. And you emit silence. But it is not emptiness. It is presence, the kind that unsettles those still lost in the performance. You don't have to announce your return. You don't need applause. You are the tension in the room, the consequence no one saw coming. Because in this void, this brutal, blessed void, you didn't find peace. You found precision, the edge of you that was always there, buried under obligation and doubt. So no, this isn't where your story ends. It's where the others fall away. You don't rise yet. You wait, not because you're weak, but because real power doesn't rush. The void sharpened you. Now you hold the blade. You were never meant to hear this, not because it was forbidden, but because the world never expected you to survive long enough to understand it. You were designed for silence, for smallness, fed just enough hope to keep you obedient. but never enough fire to make you dangerous. They gave you rules dressed as morals, cages wrapped in comfort, and when you questioned it, they told you that doubt was a flaw. They smiled as they buried your instincts beneath the weight of expectation, but something didn't die. It waited. You felt it, haven't you? In the moments between sleep and waking, in the ache that pulses behind your eyes when you're surrounded by noise, that hunger, that pull. It's not ambition, it's memory. The memory of what you were before they rewrote you, before the layers of false humility, fake civility, and the dull repetition of empty days. You were a storm once, you just forgot, but you remember now, not because of anything I said, but because something inside you is stirring, like a locked door slowly unlatching. You feel the pulse in your fingertips, the weight behind your gaze. This isn't inspiration, this is recognition. You're not becoming something new. You're returning to what you always were before they trained you to betray yourself. They will say you've changed. They will say you've become cold, sharp, distant, good. Let them whisper. Let them wonder where your smile went. Let them try to provoke the old version of you, the one that apologized for everything, that bled for approval, that mistook kindness for consent. That version is gone, and in its place stands silence sharpened into strategy, stillness forged into calculation. You are not bitter, you are precise, not angry, awake, not heartless, but finally aware of who deserves to touch your energy and who must starve in its absence. You do not announce your return. You arrive quietly, like smoke before fire, like an omen before a reckoning. The people who once underestimated you will call it arrogance, but what they're really feeling is fear. Fear that you no longer need them, that you have become unshakable, that you know the truth now, and they cannot unteach you. This is the moment the past loses its grip on you, not because it disappears, but because it no longer defines your weight. You carry it like armor now, not chains. The betrayal taught you patterns. The rejection gave you vision. The suffering became structure, and the silence became sacred. You'll regret not hearing this before, but now you have, and it has changed you. That ache behind your ribs, that's the old programming dying. That chill crawling down your spine, that's not fear, that's your power remembering how to walk again. Don't flinch, let it take over. You've waited long enough.